might be able to do the whole presentation in 30 minutes anyway. Thanks everybody for coming to Invisible Architecture Supporting Public-Facing Technologies and into what is more than likely the appropriate basement for the IT folks in Friday afternoon at 4:30. We were talking about that this morning, about how IT winds up usually sort of disconnected from everything else, and it's appropriate that this IT panel got down here. And I know that there's something going on in a half an hour where people want to go drink, so we'll move it right along. Hopefully everybody's having a good session. It was an incredibly good day today, I thought, and hopefully we'll keep that going. So there's going to be three of us presenting case studies. And we're going to be doing this from three different perspectives. So we're going to be doing from the beginning, implementation, and the do-over stage. I'm going to do the beginning, Bill Weinstein from Philadelphia Museum of Art. Brian is going to do the implementation piece, and Jane is going to talk about what happens after you've done this once and you're compelled to do it again. So my talk is entitled 0 to 60 in No Time, because what happened to me was 2 years ago when we were completing our strategic plan. We went from really having no interactives in galleries at all, nothing very interactive really. We had looping videos, we had rented audio players, cell phone tours, things that people had that were traditional. And then we had a strategic plan that had everything to do with engaging audiences and technology. So either the word technology appeared in what our goals were, or people would fake pictures, because none of this stuff actually was in our museum that when they were doing the strategic plan. So they staged these pictures for, this is not even art that we have, to say what they wanted us to do. So then all of a sudden, then I have to do it. And so then we went from having nothing to doing a number of in-gallery interactives. We have just started this summer. We did a location-aware with IBeacons. We did a location-aware app. We've been experimenting with a variety of things, transparent touch, and we've been thinking about creating immersive environments. Mostly motivated by what people have read in various other newspapers when they were talking about my colleagues. But unfortunately, we had nothing. So we had no infrastructure to build to support the projects. We had no process for creating anything. We had no dedicated staff to build them, and we had no budget. So it was my kind of.
You did have a timeline, I'm assuming.
We did. We did have. Well, we had an immediate timeline. So the idea was because everybody had seen what everybody else had done, and so it looked like you could do that stuff just like that. So it was like, so we wrote this plan and we made these pictures, and so where's the stuff? So we started to do some foundational work while we were actually having to create the things that we were compelled to make quicker. And so we started with very basic things. We started installing Wi-Fi, better Wi-Fi in the galleries. We started to try to develop some equipment standards. We thought about media storage. We began thinking about all these things. And these really, for us, from the beginning stage, are really the questions that we're asking ourselves and trying to think about what we need to do to build it. One of the things that I did to myself was when we were managing right after the strategic plan and we were talking about how to manage technology, I made the very strong case that the people who were responsible for infrastructure management and information management should also be the people responsible for interactive creation, because there is a synergy in all of that. So then I had to actually make that work. So we still had to create things, and then I actually did have to create all the infrastructure. Like I said, that was going to be the synergy for that, so I actually had to do that work. And so we were in the beginnings of thinking about how we sort of pull that work together into the normal infrastructure work that we're doing, and these are the questions that we've been asking ourselves. We had to develop complete processes for content development and information management. We had to talk to our collections data people specifically about how to actually get our collections information projects to actually produce the data that we actually wanted to have in our public-facing interactives. So they would make things, they would do registrarial data, they would do some research data, but nobody was actually creating the data to do the work that we were trying to do on the other end. We had no CMS that would work for in-gallery interactives or mobile interactives. We had no application development environment of any meaningful way. We didn't even actually have an application developer. We had our support staff was help desk staff that was not really interested in or skilled in understanding how they would deal with interactives. when we had looping videos, our AV department did that. They understood how to do that. They understood how to configure the Alcode McBride projectors and all this sort of stuff. They didn't know how to reboot a computer if it was down. They didn't understand how the interactives would work. They didn't understand how to do remote management to those, and some of them actually didn't really care all that much. So we had to work through that from my staff perspective. We had to work through teaching people that even now that it is not a traditional AV piece of equipment, but the AV department was responsible for doing these things. So you guys are going to have to learn how to do this work because you're still the people who are here on the weekends when they're going to break. And now you have to actually go into the galleries and fix these instead of just the old ones. So it was a mindset change in our department and a mindset change throughout the institution. And we had to get more involved with curators and interpreters to talk to them about what kind of information they were creating and how we would fit that into the infrastructure. Budget. So in addition to not having any of the other things before that, when we were deciding what to add, we didn't have an operating budget to add any of the new equipment that we needed. We didn't have an operating budget that was going to add any of the staff. We didn't have a real good view into the special project budgets. Our director of special exhibitions was using a model for costing out what an interactive would cost in the same model that she was using when she was costing out how to do small videos in galleries. So they would put in $5,000 or $7,000 into this, and then they would expect us to produce 3 different interactives and a handheld interactive in 2.5 weeks for $7,000. So it was a challenging piece to get that budgeting piece changed. It was a challenging piece to think about what the changes we would have to make to our operating budget would be and how to get those pushed forward. And then to work through the question that's been coming around with everybody, to work through the question of how to get this work into the endowment, because our department has grown, and so we have ongoing operating expenses that we can't continually fundraise for, that the endowment has to support the fact that we've added 7 people, that the fact that our equipment budget is going to grow, that we have to think about recycling and how to recycle and refresh this equipment, because we don't ever want to have the sign that says, this exhibit is temporarily out of service. So, but you have to be able to maintain those things and move forward. And then you have to be able to tell the story that the shiny things on top, the interactives on top, are actually supported by a number of things below. So people have to understand that it isn't just that you see something in the New York Times, that there's this beautiful wall that seemed to miraculously come out of the smoke, but there's in fact a whole group of things that are under that, and if you can't support the pieces under it, you're not going to be able to build the things on top. And so we use this chart now in our discussions with development and with other people to have a simple presentation that, when you want to actually think about interactives, if you don't think about these other things, we're not going to be able to produce anything that we can sustain.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Dawson, Chief Digital Officer for the Canada Science and Technology Museums Corporation. So I'm just going to sort of pick up the thread here and sort of have a look at where we're at now in terms of implementing some of these sort of back-end infrastructure at our museums. So let's see here. So first, just a little bit about us. We're a Crown Corporation in Canada that runs 3 of the national museums: our Canada Agriculture and Food Museum, our Canada Aviation and Space Museum, and our flagship Canada Science and Technology Museum. Now, the Canada Science and Technology Museum, just a little bit of background to set this up. It was first opened about 48 years ago and operated for for all that time in this temporary facility. And it made the news a little bit over the last year, and a lot of the news was about mold. We had a massive mold outbreak, and it shut down the facility in the fall of 2014. And really, this was it was really a consequence of significant issues with the aging facility that was never built as a museum. So the federal government, the Canadian government of Canada, is investing significant funds into helping to reboot the museum now. And so we're actually in the midst of a process of renewing the Canada Science and Technology Museum, effectively rebuilding the museum almost from scratch. And so now a major project for us now is the digital reboot of the museum. The new museum is going to be a highly digital experience, and so we're putting in place a platform that can support many different types of digital interactives throughout the new museum. This creates a very significant opportunity, obviously, for putting new infrastructure in place. So, in terms of a sense of scale of the project, the new museum is being broken into 6 major galleries, and so this is over 80,000 square feet of exhibition space. And so all these exhibitions are being built in parallel with what will be as many as 6 different design build firms working with us together while we're building the platform in parallel with their work. So it's a little bit complicated. Now we're anticipating like hundreds of digital IP-based computers and devices and so forth within the museum. It's kind of like our own Internet of Things inside in the museum. And so how do we manage all these hundreds of different digital devices? Well, I'm pretty sure that this isn't the way that we manage them. It does reflect a little bit of our past, though, in that in the past our exhibitions were sort of built kind of project by project, so no common standards. And we did have some where we'd have to sort of load new content by plugging in that USB key. So that's not the approach that we're looking for in the new museum. So I'm gonna have a look at an approach that we're taking, and it's kind of specific to our drivers. But I may be very curious to sort of when the discussion opens up to see kind of drivers that are relevant for each of you. So with our approach, kind of at the core is a standards for exhibition computers within the museum. So here we're talking about hardware, software, and accessibility standards for digital interactives. And to be able to manage those interactives, we're looking at content management, system and device management, and code management as well, software code management. Another piece that we're plugging into this is analytics as well, to be able to derive analytics from the use of digital interactives. And a significant thing for us is the code repository. The approach that we're taking is to use a common or shared code repository between us and the design build firms that are going to be working with us. And so it'll be development, transparent sort of development in the open, where they see our updates, we see their updates. They can use sort of shared components from us. And so we have a constant pulse in terms of how what's a massive distributed software project is developing. So I'm going to show a couple of architecture slides here. I'm not going to get into these in detail, but there's just a couple of things I wanted to highlight. So one of the big systems here is this exhibit management system that's managing both the devices and also the code. And one of the concepts we've got here on this slide, we call it like a continuous integration server here. But it's a key thing for us is being able to take software from that code repository and be able to push updated builds of software onto the either into a test environment or onto the exhibition floor. So that's part of what we're trying to achieve. It's an approach that's going to allow us to make sure that code base is constantly up to date and valid, and also where are we here? Sorry, just one sec. Sort of just lost my train of thought here. I'll just sort of move on here one sec. The next piece is our exhibition content management system. And so the one kind of facet I wanted to sort of highlight here with the exhibition content management system was that we're providing kind of a simple way for end users to be able to update content on the floor. Not everything is going to be sort of updatable by a content management system, but this content management system will be able to take content and actually one type of update we'll be able to do is to be able to have sort of content from mere mortals be able to be updated and embedded into the recompiled interactives. And so a third piece to this, in terms of making all this work, in terms of the co-development with our design build firms, is an integration toolkit. So we've got to provide resources for them, common libraries and components and so forth that they'll be making use of. So that's the like a third sort of key element in terms of making this sort of approach work. So this is there's a number of benefits that we're anticipating, and again, these benefits are again driven by what we're trying to achieve and some of the specifics to our environment. Obviously, there's benefits coming from a standardized sort of hardware and software environment. There's ownership or access to the source code, being able to maintain that code into the future. There's a transparent development approach in terms of how we work with the design build firms. We know that our code is up to date and we can continuously recompile it on the floor, and also allows quick recovery of exhibit computers. If there's a hardware failure, we're able to swap in new hardware and get the latest code base and content base right on that computer. There's a means of content management for non-technical staff and an integrated analytics platform. But we recognize that there's some risks with this approach. There's potentially a more limited pool of developers that really want to participate in that kind of more open development, process, if you will. That could be a factor in terms of the richness of the pool of developers that are going to be participating with this. There's also risk around developing the platform in parallel with the exhibitions. That's a risk we can't do much about given the tight timelines we've got on our project. While we're aiming to develop most of this kind of on open source platforms, there's a lot of kind of custom integration, and so there's a system here that we're going to need to be able to support into the future. So a lot of this again has been driven by some of our drivers, if you will, and I'll be very keen to hear in the discussion what some of the drivers are that you guys are facing as well, and alternate approaches. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jane.
So this morning I was on a panel where we talked about our digital strategy implementation, and we started all our interactives with a philosophy and a method for implementation of our back-end systems, from hardware to how we were going to move data and content to how all our application systems would link up together. And that's been part of a big strategy that we continue to refine and update all the time. And so I thought today it'd be much more interesting to talk about one small project, even within the Gallery 1 project, one project that's huge, but it's like one tiny part of the whole thing. And not only that, a functionality aspect of ArtLens. So ArtLens is our app. And what is ArtLens? ArtLens has dynamically pulls from our back-end system. Every object that's on view is always available, and it has location awareness, meaning that as you walk around the museum, it will pop up wherever you are and show the objects that are around you. And then within that, there's content, videos. There's also a way to personalize every object, save it to your own favorites, make your own tour based on what you liked the night before when you were going through the app. There's the ability to scan objects. So as you walk around the museum, you see something you like, you can be 50 feet away, there can be people in front of you. It scans, hotspots pop up with like one sentence or something that makes you hopefully go look at the object. Everything about this is about looking at the object, not about looking at your device. It also connects to our 40-foot collection wall. So you see something on the wall you like, you touch the heart, it saves right to your device. So the best part of really thinking about a back-end system and really refining it is that when you do iterations, so when we went from the iPad to the Android to the iPhone version, we got to really think about UX and UI, and we weren't thinking about how are we going to make this all work. We also, whatever we do, be it our digital signage, our online collection, any kind of activity that revolves pulling stuff from our collection, it all goes the same way in that our digital asset management system pulls all the metadata from our collection content management system. There's a CMS that reads the application and all the rules, and thus goes out to whatever kind of application you're building. So that's talking a little bit, that's showing the scanning. So the near you now has been the trickiest part, and the near you now is as you walk around, it pops up where you are. So the blue dot problem is one of the things is the accuracy of what people expect in indoor location finding. So when you're driving around, your GPS, and you're trying to get to a place, it seems pretty accurate. Although you're really not, you're just not indoors within 10 feet. So we find that there's this accuracy that if you have a tiny gallery, you're next to another gallery, they will open where you're at, but the blue dot will be sifted somewhere else, and someone might be focused on where the blue dot is, and then there's a confusion, and the visitor doesn't think it's working. So what other options are there? Well, we have Wi-Fi triangulation, and initially we were going to do everything through Wi-Fi triangulation. We were in the middle of a $330 million renovation restoration project for the building. They had already completed half the galleries, and then we said, oh, we're going to do this whole new wayfinding experience. So we're going to go into the brand new galleries and add these cut holes in the wall so we could add, oh, that's the other thing, all the APs were in a straight line, which obviously doesn't work in triangulation, but we're going to get them there and we're going to move them around, and they said, I don't think you're not going to do that, come up with another idea. So we went with a hosted solution. We worked with Amazon, and it did work fairly well. The issue was we kind of kicked that can down the road, because to have a hosted solution and operating costs, you were going to be paying, with the amount of nodes we had, about $70,000 a year. No one wants to eat up their operating budget that way, so we decided to bring that in-house. At the same time, someone said, and I have this slide from Museums in the Web 2014, but what about IBeacons? Everyone's like, IBeacons, IBeacons, and I was like, that explained what it was to everyone who didn't know at the time. But it was also, yeah, but we're not ready for it. We may use it for the wall, but it's really not the accuracy level that we want to do and accomplish, and our app can already do better than what IBeacons can do. So bring us October 24th, we added 240 IBeacons to the museum. And we did this for multiple reasons, but one, we were really looking for a way that a constant signal be going at, and we could do it from multiple devices. We were finding issue with different devices and the machinery within any iOS application. So this is just a little thing about our iBeacons and what they are. I'm assuming most people know where they are, so it's in the slides if you want to read it. But we liked it also because we could hide them in our light tracks, and they're like the size of a dime. So, this is showing exactly where they all over our entire museum. So once we installed all these iBeacons, we had to do what's called fingerprinting, collect fingerprints of the entire museum. And we then take all the data from fingerprints. So you literally walk around the gallery in all these different patterns to collect the movement in each gallery. And then we load this up to the Amazon ITS server. So this is showing the routes. This is actually the routes in each of the galleries, how we walked around to collect those. So not a perfect science either, and depending on who that day you had going out and doing it, someone could be a little lazier than the other person. They all assumed it was fine, but we found that it doesn't always work as well. Amazon provides an SDK. This also is, we're deploying within our application, ArtLens. So we have the people who develop ArtLens working with Amazon, and Amazon saying, oh, it's the application. The application people are saying it's the SDK. And in the end, we kind of found out that the SDK really did need some help. So we remapped everything. We loaded up a new SDK, and we were like, so problem solved? And what do you think? No. Now, I will say, solved for 70% of the museum. It works really well. You walk around, it's like magic. I mean, it's really beautiful how well it just pops open. But then there's always the problems with building infrastructure, and it impacts your accuracy all the time. So the magnetic field has become one of the biggest parts. We have a whole new building. There's a ton of steel in the two towers, and Also, it's atrium the size of a football field. That's open spaces over a balcony with glass. I mean, we're just setting this up. This actually, we chose this because we are actually off an entire 180 degrees when you just have a basic compass. That's how much the building factors into it. So we also did learn, as I said, that there's no physical boundaries when you have an atrium and you have the art in these alleys. So how do you work around that? And so we have lots of discussions, like, do you change the UX and UI to help you like work around these like to pretend it's 180 degrees the other way. We also have artworks in our contemporary galleries that are full of metal that throw the whole thing off. We also have spaces, it marks it in sort of rectangular spaces, and you'll have, so if you have an L and you have a gallery over here, if it's reading it like a rectangle here and here, it's going to jump over to this space. So, you know, what kind of polygons are you going to make it so it's readable? So where we are at now, right now, is we also learned this. You can hold an iPad. You know how you have the iPad UX is to be horizontal landscape, but if you hold the bottom, the little dot this way instead of this way, and we all know an iPad can go both, you will get a different reading because of the accelerometer inbred in the actual device. So that's another thing. Do we have something in the UI that tells you hold it this way, or do we do something with the actual infrastructure to make it work? The other thing is mobile operating systems. They're always changing. We decide, like, we're suddenly up there. People are having not only new kinds of phones, you have the 6 Plus, but operating systems since we started ArtLens in 2012, the adoption rate of a new operating system is like 80% or within the first 48 hours or 75%. It's an extremely high number. And so even though you know these operating systems are coming and you have time to test, it's always like hits you all these different factors. And at one point we actually had a sheet that if you have, you know, iPhone 4S on this operating system doing this, this won't work. But if you have a 4S and you're on 6 Plus, then do this. And the bigger issue also became, and the biggest issue right now of the phone is that you have to commit to downloading a really large app to your phone, and it doesn't download in the background. So it takes, you know, if you're at our museum and you have a 6 Plus, it downloads in 4 minutes. But it takes up a huge amount of space. And you can, at home or on Starbucks, it could take you, you know, 18 minutes to download it. So we are at a place now where we are we're kind of starting over. We like the functionality. We've done a lot of tests with that. But how do we build this so that there's no feeling that things are not working or that you have to do a workaround? And we are actually in the midst of, we just sort of created all the problems we're going to solve. And the two big ones is that you can download it in the background, takes up a lot less space, and what we're going to test with the wayfinding. And we're also, sorry, I forgot about the radius of confidence. That's another thing we found out, that like if you stand still, it's really a big amount of space. You start moving, all of a sudden it gets really specific. But how do you get people who are trying to figure out where they are to say, just start walking? So I'm hoping next year at this time, I'm going to show you what's pulling it all. And it's, you know, you keep making Band-Aids and you finally realize if you really like the product, sometimes you're going to have to just pull it all out. We still have a big part that's coming from our main infrastructure, but we're excited to see where this goes. And so now we sort of decided that we're throwing the questions out to the gallery, and we sort of brought some ideas to begin with. But if you guys have questions or want to start a discussion, we have time, and that's it. Sure.
Yeah, like in all of this, how do you balance between custom-built software systems and other things versus off-the-shelf software? What do you gravitate towards, and what do you try to do?
Why don't you start and we'll go in.
So you always inherit a lot of legacy systems,
Yeah.
some custom built, some off the shelf. Usually none of it's doing what you want it to do, right? So we look at, and I wish I had the chart, but we really do look at the big picture of all our systems, and they all need to be able to speak to each other in one way. So, I mean, we're really into if you can't make a customizable API to talk to it, or if it's, so like Blackbaud products, I don't want to, but we will, you know, we've gotten rid of them because, except for Financials, because that's out on its own still. But if you can't have it talk to all our different systems and be part of the big thing, we've made a decision. Otherwise, we work around, it's costly. There's, I forgot the word for, what's the word for revamping legacy systems and modernizing legacy systems? There's this whole new, anyway.
Rapid?
Rapid.
Make a wrapper?
No, but anyway, we look to see if it's worth, we do a real needs assessment and then an investigation of what is worth keeping. So sometimes like the data structures that we're using in certain, that are customizable are better than anything that's out there, but the UX is awful. There's no spell check, there's no admin interface that's easy. So do we just build onto that, or do we start over? And that's how we access it, but a mixture of both.
What about with your project?
Yeah, I'd sort of in a similar vein, like I think it depends a lot on where you're starting from and what already exists in your environment and what do you really want to stick with that's in your environment. And so that question of what you're integrating with. So if I even just sort of think about our project as an example, in terms of content management for the museum floor, we don't have a system in place right now. We considered possibly using our web content management system to be the content management system for the floor, but we decided it'll be cleaner to take a different approach with that. But I could contrast that with, say, Telespark, the Calgary Science Center. They actually use an approach kind of similar to what we're building, but they had to integrate with a digital signage system, and they use the digital signage system for content management. And while there may be some benefits because they know and they like that system, but it causes them a lot of grief because there are all these little custom integrations that they have to do, and their system isn't as open as some systems, as some other systems are. That digital signage system they use is more of a closed system. So I think they're stuck on a version from about 4 years ago, and there's 6 major releases since then, because if they upgrade their digital signage system now, their whole floor CMS will break. So there's the questions will get specific to your organization. I think I don't think there's a universal way to look at what proprietary stuff, what open, what's custom, how custom are your integrations. But the more open the platforms are, the better.
Yeah, one of the things with with Gallery One experience was there was this talk about, well, did you do it in open source and to do the level of some of those interactives? It seemed like we would be giving up a lot to do that. But now we're doing sort of a version 2.0 of the part that's for families that we call Studio Play, and we are working with a firm that creates new libraries that are open to other people, so that we are still within the museum, giving back to the museum in the way we're thinking, and that people can build upon it. But we thought that same way. We ripped out we had Sitecore for our website. We changed to Drupal back in 2011, 12. And I did that because I thought, well, this whole community, there's all these modules, we can all share together. And yet it feels, as much as I'm a big fan of open source, and I think Drupal can do a lot, especially all the things we want to do, I haven't seen that sort of community of really we were all going to be working on all these different modules and be able to share and get to the really good stuff, instead of all of us figuring out a better way to do a calendar that integrates with your online collection, that does this,
So if there are no questions, are there people that are struggling with these issues also? Because I think for us, it's also really interesting to find out where people are in your end. So if anybody wants to talk about the trials and tribulations they're having in their institution, that would be great.
I have more of a question still, which is going back to your presentation, you were talking about resources. balance and needing to get more resources into IT, especially as IT is taking on additional responsibilities. I was wondering if you could share, just as a rough benchmark, the amount, like the percent of your total staff that lives in this world, or the percent of your total budget that lives in this world, is kind of a guidepost for what is it.
So when we started, when we were given, or when we got the responsibility to do this work, we created a separate section. So prior to that, we had 2 staff that were responsible essentially for doing some functionality and making content changes on the website. And so we created an interactive technologies divisions, which has 7 staff. So which is now a third of my total department. So it's a significant change in that staff operating budget, and we got a commitment from the institution, because we were doing this as a strategic initiative, that we were able to hire those people without really without the endowment piece under the operating budget to support that. So for the last few years, we've been doing fundraising specifically, even just around supporting that staff, to continue to do that, and we're doing fundraising to do the endowment piece. But it was just to get that part done. It's easy to get project money. It's easy to get people to give us money to do things. It's very, very difficult, as everybody knows, to get people, to also give you money for the people to do the things.
Yeah, and when I started in 2010, I mean, I would say we had 3.5 people who were basically help desk, and we had 3 people in AV, and as people left for whatever if something came up, I restructured constantly based on there was an opportunity, and I did have to push that we were going back for different salaries, and but the idea that there was really no application team at the museum, and yet they wanted to do all these type of projects, was sort of insane. And we had a network engineer, but like that we're doing all the infrastructure side. And so we do build a lot with partners that are sort of, even on our org chart, we have them as like extensions of our staff, because the people that work it are like our staff, and I believe very much in those kind of partnerships. But as we talked about this morning, the idea that technology in a museum really needs its own endowment at some level, because it just looks so, to do certain things, the cost looks so high, and compared to even just the salaries for developers, are going to be more than a curator sometimes, depending and it's hard to justify, but because there's not an understanding of what it really costs to do these kind of things. And so it's really an education from my position is really working with director of advancement and the director to meet new types of donors, different donors than you usually have at the museum, to really be part of this next iteration.
You're saying that you encounter all these problems with IBeacons. Did people promise you something different, and then when you actually went in there,
No.
Because all these things around the metal. My museum is going to be underground, and there's lots of flying in all sorts of buttresses and things, and no one's ever mentioned steel to me, and no one's ever mentioned being subterranean might be an issue. I don't know.
Well, we were building all this while the building was being built. So there's a greatness to doing everything at once, because you can make big decisions for how you want to run the museum while lots of things are going on. But you can't really test things the way you would. Beacons work. The problem is the level of sophistication. I don't know if you've tried Art Lens, but the level I have not seen an app that does this level of location awareness and really throws up the content as you walk into each space. It really throws it up, and it's right there. But beacons alone work. I mean, I don't believe in battery beacons. You have to replace them too much and sticking them on the wall usually. But if you set those up and you want to really use beacons for, it doesn't matter that there's metal. This is the combination, the overlaying of how the software that was developed for the beacons is working within the application and within the device and the devices like accelerometer. All those 3 have to work together, and they don't work together the way you think they're going to work together in certain spaces. Yeah. Especially if you're in a space that shows you with a regular compass, you know, that it's 180 degrees the other way, north is south.
You were gonna build a hole in the wall and do it, okay, would that have been made the difference?
Oh, you mean using triangulation with APs? We want to, maybe, I mean, but there's different levels of, I mean, beacons really can get you down to 10 meters. And-
Or we actually did do a beacons test this summer with an application. So to the first question, you know, do people tell you they can do things and then not be able to deliver? So we worked for about 18 months with a vendor that has a location aware beacon technology piece to try to get exactly what Jane's talking about. We wanted to be able to get into a room and have content delivered to you based on location. So it's a very granular location. It requires a significant amount of tuning of the beacons. It requires probably a lot more beacons than most people want to be able to manage in,
Yeah,
in
there's
any given
250
space.
iBeacons in.
We have 300 and something in ours in order to try to do that. So to getting a vendor to do that and getting a vendor to program that, it wasn't that they didn't. It wasn't so much that they didn't want to, or that it was a lie. When, you know, everybody was trying to figure out how to do it, they thought they could do it based on what they had, and when at the end of the day they couldn't. But we were able to make an application this summer for a kids application that we did for an art book. And we were actually able to get into those places where we could tune the beacons, where you actually did walk within about 3 feet of the object, and then the content is actually delivered to you in that regard. And we're trying to, so we did it in the context that we're in, because we don't have a lot of back-end infrastructure right now. So we've done this piece, and now we're going back through and re-engineering it to see if we can expand that into a larger tour. We knew where everything was. It was kind of a fixed location. We can kind of gang around the objects that we knew that we wanted to get and add the beacons around those things. So we kind of sort of a little bit of faking it. To do that with 8,000 objects, you know, on display becomes a little bit of a different issue. But you can get that granular piece, and to the point of whether or not you're going to build your own. At that point, there wasn't anybody building that. So we were in the position where we were going to have to build that piece by ourselves. Now we have to decide whether or not we want to keep building that piece on our own.
And the other question of making something work, like there are things we did to make something work when Gallery went open, and then we spent the next year, how do you make it so it works for any
Right,
object on
right.
view when it comes up as automate? You can make certain things work, but as soon as you move things around, it will break. And so the real trick is how do you make this
Right.
so any situation will work.
And it is the danger of making things work, especially in our case, for a test. So because one of the things we've had to teach in our institution is you know, everybody understands words about iterative and agile, and people see these things and they understand them. And then when you make an application that, you know, we made this application in 2.5 months, and we did these things just to see if they would work. And now all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, you know, well, we should just put this out on the front line, you know, we should just be handing these things out every day. And it's like, well, you know, there's really no there. And we did it for this small 2-month period to see how it was a test. It's an iterative test. And now we're going to now we know that we can do it, and now we're going to re-engineer it and see if we can sustain it. And everybody, you know, the content people were like, we put a lot of effort into that content. We're really angry that you're not putting that content out on the front lines anymore. And we're like, you know, well, we put a lot of effort into the back end, and we think by tomorrow the whole thing is going to collapse. So, so you know, so it's teaching what an iterative process actually means. That you build something, you test it, and it becomes a foundation for something else. But it isn't a finished product right at the point that you've done your first test.
Brian, Brian felt like, I mean, one of the big things we had is we have applications, and ours is all about that it pulls from the weekly refresh, and it's all dynamic. And then when you really do a small thing, it can make it work. But then the whole idea of getting this refresh now go through multiple different systems and have all your artworks go through it can cause. Have you found, like, since you're in the middle of implementing, that all of a sudden what you thought made sense and works on a very small level you can't manage it's too slow, or the amount of objects or things like that, you have to kind of rethink it?
Yeah, we've had some, like, there are some things that we've done, say, just for like one exhibition, like an approach, say, for content management, that it may have worked for that particular project, but we just know it wouldn't scale across managing content in all the galleries. Sometimes some of our experiments up to now have been done in a way that's very specific for the installation in question. And one of our challenges is that with the whole museum rebuild and so much happening in terms of custom interactive software development, we have a bit of a different driver, in that we need a way to manage all that custom software and all those systems that's running that custom software. So in some ways, we've had to skip now, and there's some, again, risk associated with that, moving from some of the smaller projects to, okay, it's showtime, and we're gonna ramp this up to the entire institution, and we're expecting a few kind of twists and adjustment along the way as we go.
I feel like I cut someone off. Someone's going to ask something.
Oh, I was gonna comment on William's, I was gonna say, it sometimes helps to not have your prototype too polished.
Yes. Yeah.
I know,
Because then
I
it
know.
has that problem.
Yes. It does.
It's a tricky thing
It's a
because you want to
tricky- it is,
you
yeah.
want to get the money behind it, and
Yeah.
and buy-in from people, and at the same
Yeah.
time
And as I'm- yeah.
expectations are.
And as I'm reminded often that I work in an art museum, so, so things that we put out on the floor have to have a certain aesthetic, and so there's not a lot of tolerance for things that are presented to the public that don't look finished. It's the other thing we're trying to teach.
Actually, one thing we just, I mean, it's officially opened this week, is the opposite wall, the collection wall in Gallery 1 is now a beta gallery. And we have 2 projects right now, but beta, I mean, it's still pretty refined looking, but the whole point is that these are temporary, we're gonna learn from them, we're gonna expect your feedback, and we don't expect them, we're trying to understand what works and doesn't work, and we're gonna take some risk here, and we've really clarified that it's a beta gallery, which I think will be fun. So everybody ready to go get a beer? Close their eyes? Thank you very much.